Welcome to the latest instalment of Close Readings. In this series, we are considering a series of poems that could be thought of in one way or another as political, in their intention, or their associations, or their impact, or their historical circumstances. My name is Seamus Perry, and I teach English at Balliol College in Oxford, and as always, I'm talking to Mark Ford, poet, critic, and Professor of English at University College London. And today's text, if you want to call it that, is a bit of a much longer text, books 9 and 10 of Wordsworth's great autobiographical poem, The Prelude, and we're reading it in its 1805 version. The poem was only published in 1850 posthumously, so it's a poem that Wordsworth never sees into print, but it has, in its long afterlife, I suppose, come to seem the central Wordsworthian text. And some of the central material within that work recounts Wordsworth's experience in revolutionary France and his experiences when he returns home after France. And I suppose, Mark, the thing that's most striking about it for us is that it is the testimony of someone who really was there.
Yes, Wordsworth was committed to the ideals of the French Revolution and was exhilarated by them. Bliss was in that time to be alive, he famously said, and he had taken a long walk with his friend Robert Jones in 1790 all the way down through France. I mean, they must have walked about 2,000 miles or something.
He's got a very good pair of legs.
Yes, they walked all the way down through France. They walked through Arras, as he recalls, which is where Robespierre was born. And they, I think they're there on Bastille Day, aren't they? A year after on July 14th of 1790. And all in this preliminary journey through France, Wordsworth is very, very excited about the whole political shifting, the paradigm shift, probably the most important political event in the history of Europe since whenever, the French Revolution. It changes everything. And it happens on the back of the American Revolution, and it's got similar characters like Tom Paine and so involved in it, but as catalysts for it. But anyway, Wordsworth was uninhibitedly excited about the French Revolution, and he returns to England after the summer walking through France. And the following year, he goes to, he says, to learn the language. Is that
That's
true?
right.
Is that the reason that he goes? He spends a whole year in France. He goes to learn the language, is what he
Yes,
says.
he said, led, this is a classic piece of Wordsworthian prosaic verse, led thither chiefly by a personal wish to speak the language more familiarly.
Fair enough. A language course.
I think actually he's also trying to escape the choice of a career, which
That's
is his parent are pushing on him.
He
His
doesn't
family
want to
is
be a
pushing on him.
cleric, does he?
That's right.
He could have been a vicar.
That's right.
Which is odd because there's lots of kind of vicarish bits
Yes, that's true.
about Wordsworth. But I think this is probably, for me anyway, the most exciting and exhilarating passage in Wordsworth's life. And it's all transformative for him. In a way, I'd say it is the catalyst of his poethood. And in many ways, the story he tells is a conversion narrative that in these two books, particularly in book 9, he relates the ways in which he is converted to the cause, really fundamentally, that he commits himself utterly to the ideals of the French Revolution, which, of course, this is several years before the Terror, so it's not clear how much violence will be involved. But even so, within this poem, we can see that there's something quite zealous in the Wordsworthian, in his depictions of his experiences and emotions at this time. And the French Revolution embodied all his ideals of overthrowing the aristocracy, a new kind of covenant between nature and man in relation to egalitarianism. And so it fits in with the entire program which he and Coleridge shared, and which becomes kind of embedded in this concept of romanticism.
We should say that Wordsworth's presence amongst these revolutionary scenes is what marks him out, actually, from the rest of the Romantics. So an enthusiasm for the French Revolution, however you construe it, is not uncommon. Young Coleridge is pretty keen. William Blake is passionately keen. And the second generation Romantics, who arrive long after the history has moved on, are also very keen, Shelley and Byron and so on. But of all of these people, Wordsworth is the only one who is actually present. So when Coleridge writes a poem about the Prelude, one of the lines that's most striking within it, as Coleridge thinks about these books about Wordsworth's French experiences, The line is Coleridge saying, "Thou wert there." That's the fascinating thing for Coleridge. And yes, absolutely, this is the second visit. It's not the first visit. So it has a characteristic Wordsworthian form, doesn't it? Wordsworth's poems are not usually about visiting places and usually about revisiting places. So it's important that Book 9 isn't the first trip to France, but the second. The motives for the first trip just seem to have been the picturesque, and he rather surprises himself by finding a country that's standing on the top of golden hours, as he says earlier in the Prelude, and human nature seeming born again. So whatever his motives for going back the second time, he must have carried a thought of this kind of revolutionary or utopian excitement with him to France. But then what's so interesting in Book 9 is when he lands, his experience is rather more complicated than simply joining in with the excitement. I mean, picking up your very good idea about the conversion narrative, he doesn't get converted massively easily.
No, he goes to Paris and he's like a tourist. While silent zephyrs sported with the dust of the Bastille, I sat in the open sun and from the rubbish gathered up a stone and pocketed the relic in the guise of an enthusiast.
Yeah.
So at this moment, he feels slightly outside the French Revolutionary narrative, but he goes to Paris and spends a week there. And how long does he spend there? It's a number of it's a week
not
or
long.
so.
Yes, before heading south.
Before going to Orléans and then Blois. And he goes to all the tourist sites of the French Revolution, which are already being visited by English tourists. And he affects, he says, more emotion than I felt.
Yes.
So he gives us this sense of someone sort of gradually interested, but only gradually becoming a complete zealot in relation to the French Revolution. And he says he sees a picture by the painter Lebrun of the Magdalene, and that moves him more than all these sites which have been already are the sites where the French Revolution had kind of made its mark. He then goes down to Orléans, and there he starts hanging out with some royalists, which is a fairly sort of
tough soldiers.
Yes, aristocrats. He has letters of introduction, doesn't he? And the paradoxical effect of his conversations with all these royalists who want to undo the French Revolution is that they convert him to the other side of it, the other side of affairs. So his discussions with them fail to convert him to their cause, and the opposite happens. He finds their discourse tedious, and I gradually withdrew into a noisier world, and thus did soon become a patriot, and my heart was all given to the people, and my love was theirs.
Yes.
I mean, it really is brandishing the kind of French flag at that moment, isn't he? And
absolutely is. What's interesting about the conversion moment that happens there is that it is not just a conversion, as it were, but a return to Wordsworth's, as he portrays it, a return to Wordsworth's innermost identity. Because he's got this very odd little passage, hasn't he, where he tries to persuade himself and us that his republicanism was somehow innate. And he attributes it to several things. One, that he was born in the Lake District, where you get much more ancient homeliness, manners erect, and frank simplicity than any other nook of English land. And elsewhere in his writings, he talks about the Westmoreland and Cumberland as being a perfect republic of shepherds and agriculturalists. So there's a very, very figurative kind of republicanism that he says is already lurking within him when he has these counterproductive conversations with these aristos. The other thing that he claims, which is odd, is that Cambridge actually kind of predisposed him towards republicanism, because Cambridge and an academic life are purported to show that there was something holden up to view of a republic where all stood thus upon equal ground. Cambridge, that they were brothers all in honour as of one community. And I suppose, in a way, the background memory there is that Cambridge supported the parliamentarian cause in the Civil War, I suppose. But anyway, these are odd attempts on Wordsworth's part to psychologize his predisposition to republicanism. But the real thing that makes a difference is bumping into this hero who is, I mean, it's not Wordsworth who's the hero of Book 9, is it? It's this man he bumps into called Michel Beaupuy.
Michel Beaupuy,
what do you make of him?
Well, Michel Beaupuy is not a royalist. He's committed to the revolution. And I think in both the accounts of Beaupuy and also this royalist who's presented as somehow having all his features eaten away, he is reconfiguring Paradise Lost in various ways, I think. That the royalist who has his features hidden away and who is haunted by the revolutionary developments is unhealthy and vexatious. He's very much similar to the ways in which Satan is presented in Paradise Lost, while Beaupuis is a bit like Abdiel in Paradise Lost, the one man true amid a kind of a group of erring angels. And Beaupuis is the person who converts Wordsworth in particular to the cause, and they form a kind of very intense friendship, though they only knew each other for a couple of months. And Beaupuis actually dies in 1796, I think.
Yes, that's right.
He's in the army as well. But he is an aristocrat, but he sees that the revolution is necessary and good. And I think Wordsworth is able to identify with him more than he is with the rank and file, the peasants, so to speak, people like the hunger-bitten girl, who we'll talk about. But the kind of the symbols of poverty are very powerfully presented, but it's Beaupuis' intellectual exposition of why the revolution is necessary, which so works its way into Wordsworth's ways of thinking.
Thanks for listening to this extract from Political Poems, a close readings series from the London Review of Books. You can listen to the full episode and all our other close readings series by signing up to our close readings subscription. If you're listening in Apple, you can do that just by going to the top of this podcast, or for Spotify and other podcast apps, go to lrb.me/audio or click on the link in the description.